I was one of those people who was really excited when I heard that there was a new Tron movie in production, and I followed its development quite avidly via the movie magazines and the websites and all of that sort of thing. I was really, really fascinated. I like the original Tron. I think it doesn't go as deep as it probably could have done, but it is really interesting for the period. The notion of the grid, of the sort of virtual scape that's a metaphorical other dimension that exists within computers is brilliant. It's really interesting. It's not new, it's not novel, it's been done a million times before in fiction and whatnot, but it is interesting because it brought that concept to a mass audience in a similar way to what the Matrix did, the original Matrix. I like these movies that bring high ideas down to a popular level so that people are exposed to them, people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to them. I find that really interesting, and there's so much potential with regards to the grid concerning existentialism and all of that stuff. It's really, really cool. Also, it's just a fun movie. The original Tron is really well done. It's the effects are amazing. The aesthetics of the grid are very particular and iconic, and it's just beautiful. So when the new one was announced, I was really quite excited, slightly pessimistic, but also quite excited. And then the first trailers started to appear, and we started to get glimpses of the Jeff Bridges special effect, and my heart sank a little bit because I thought it looked dreadful. In the trailers, I really thought the effect looked awful, but I thought, well, you know, it's just a trailer, maybe they'll clean it up before then, maybe it's not finished yet. It therefore came as a massive disappointment that it's no better in the finished movie. It is terrible. The CG Jeff Bridges is fucking awful. It's plastic. It looks like it belongs in Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. It's just a really awful special effect. It doesn't look real, it has no weight. And this wouldn't have been much of a problem if it were restricted to the virtual space of the grid. That would be fine because you could sort of get away with it there, considering that it is a virtual scape and that it's a virtual Jeff Bridges. Yeah, you could sort of get away with that. Unfortunately, the first time you see it in this movie, it's used to represent the real flesh and blood Jeff Bridges from the 1980s. It's a very poor move, especially considering that it's presented alongside real human actors. And you see it in full light. You see its mouth moving, you see its eyes, its dead, doll-like eyes, its lusterless skin. It's just dreadful. It's just a really bad move on behalf of the creators of this movie. And it sets up... It really just set the tone for the rest of the movie, to be perfectly honest. I mean, first of all, the protagonist is supposed to be Jeff Bridges' character's son. Flynn's son, and he's just boring. He's a very shallow sort of tween-age genius stereotype, slightly rebellious because his daddy went missing, you know, big daddy issues obviously, anti-corporate, and it's just, even the opening sequences are so boring. They're so sort of intent on battering you over the head with aesthetics and with their own sort of flashy cleverness that nothing really deep is explored, and it's boring. It's just fucking boring. I mean, what got me in the opening sequences more than anything is the utterly ridiculous board meeting. You see, Flynn's son is at odds with the company that his father set up, which is now making computer software, and there's a board meeting going on concerning a new operating system that they're running, that they're going to release, and they're talking. They talk like sort of like evil mega corporate stereotypes from some other from a comic book movie. It's really dreadful. There's no ambiguity. There's no subtlety at all. And I just couldn't be arsed with it. There is one thing in the opening sequences that interested me, and that's when one of the board members, who was a friend of Flynn and who is sort of like a surrogate father to the younger Flynn, talks to Flynn about what the grid represents and about what his father's discoveries represent. He talks about how there are all of these ramifications concerning virtual space and existentialism and medicine and religion and all of this stuff, but it's never fucking followed. This stuff is never explored. The movie just errs on the side of action set pieces, which it does passably well. I will say that it does passably well, but not well enough to make it interesting. If it wasn't going to explore this stuff, then why did it mention it? It shouldn't have mentioned it at all, especially considering that this is exactly the same stuff, using exactly the same subject matter that The Matrix explored. Which is, it's what this film sets itself up against philosophically, and it just doesn't work. It's not good enough, it's not well written enough, it's not stylish enough, it's not well directed enough, it's not clever enough. It's just boring. The movie is so boring, and that's amazing. Even when it gets into the grid, even when it's in the grid, it's initially interesting to look at. And then it gets dull again, because you keep getting battered over the head with the same stuff. And you just think, oh, fucking get on with it, why don't you? And the worst thing is, there are so many wasted opportunities. The virtual Jeff Bridges who exists in the grid, this is not a spoiler, don't worry, is not Jeff Bridges. It's this virtual construct called Clue, which Jeff Bridges created with the express intention of developing the perfect system. Now this is interesting. Clue could have been so interesting. He could have been so ambiguous. He could have presented a philosophical alternative to what Jeff Bridges, Flynn, rather, actually represents. But he doesn't. He's just a very stereotypical, very cruel, very narcissistic bad guy from the very first instance. If I were writing it, there would have been much more of a conflict between the younger Flynn, Clue, and the older Flynn. It would have been a philosophical struggle where the younger Flynn would have had to have made the decision. Instead, it's established very early on that Clue is evil. Clue is just evil, and there's just nothing else to him. And from that point on, all you really get are these very forced action set pieces. And this is another thing that fucked me off about the movie. The younger Flynn just learns everything about the grid like that. He can fight with the discs. He can ride the light cycles. He can sort of comprehend it very easily. And it's like, fuck off. He's been thrown into another reality, basically, a virtual reality, and he just reacts to it as if it's like, oh right, okay, maybe it's a failing on behalf of the actor, who is crap, and on behalf of the writing, which is also crap. I mean, there's hardly a moment where he stops and expresses any genuine or heartfelt awe for this at all. It's a bad movie, and I think the only reason it got most of the reviews have been lukewarm at best, but the only reason it got lukewarm reviews is because it is riding the wave of nostalgia that came from the original Tron. Another thing that fucking bothers me about the movie is that you have the characters saying, oh, we need to go here to do this, to do that. This is what the plot consists of. It's just characters saying, we need to do this, we need to do that, blah, 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 blah. And they have opportunities to do these things and don't fucking do it. It's one of those movies where you shriek at the screen, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why aren't you going here? Why aren't you going here? The big thing comes at the end. They have to get Flynn and Flynn the Younger back to the portal that will take him back to reality. And there's a train that goes there. Jeff Bridges finds a train that goes there. Why didn't they just take the fucking train to begin with? Instead of fucking about. Just going to places where there are going to be fights and where you've got Daft Punk playing an interesting soundtrack, and there's this bizarre character who is basically David Bowie's Aladdin Sane, who does nothing, completely underplayed and underused. It's not even aesthetically interesting enough to hold the attention for very long. I was sitting there with just feeling my arse growing gradually more numb, waiting for it to bloody end. There is an even, oh god, they force, Tron is in this movie bizarrely. He doesn't need to be, because Tron doesn't feature really. He's a completely incidental character who is completely forced in there, and it's so badly written. The way he is just jackhammered into the plot when it's so unnecessary, and oh god, it's just so bad. There's so much narrative convenience going on that's not developed enough. It's just a bad movie. And it's a shame. It's such a shame, because there is potential in this subject matter. There is a lot of potential for bringing really interesting ideas down to a popular level, and communicating them in a manner that's elegant and interesting and fun and witty. But it just doesn't do it. It's a movie that just makes me go, ugh, and there's no way I'll be sitting down and watching it again.